This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Bruchim Abam, welcome everyone. Thank you everyone for coming. Welcome back after Pesach. We hope you had a good Yom Tov. And as Yom Tov of Pesach ends, we're beginning a new time of the year, Sfiras HaOmer. And the Ramban, in next week's Parsha, Parsha Emor, there's an amazing Ramban. The Ramban prefaces his words by saying that what he's about to tell us is Al Derech HaEmes. Now, when the Ramban says Al Derech HaEmes, it means Al Pi Kabbalah. But nevertheless, the Ramban says something that's very worthwhile for us to know. And that is, just as the Yom Tov of Sukkot first has 7 days, and then Shmini Atzeres, it has Yom Tov, Chol HaMoed in between, and then Shmini Atzeres. The Yom Tov of Pesach is the exact same thing. You have 7 days, followed by Atzeres. The only thing is, Atzeres comes 49 days later. Says the Ramban, the days in between Pesach and Shavuos are akin to Chol HaMoed. The Ramban says, Al Derech HaEmes, the Ramban in Parshas Emor, Perek Chav Gimel, Pasuk Lamed Vav, says Ramban, V'kidesh Yom Shmini, Hashem sanctified the 8th day, K'shmini Shel Chag, just like the 8th day of Sukkot. V'hayomim Hasefurim Ve'intayim, and the days that are counted in between, Kechol Shel Moed, are like Chol HaMoed, Ben Arishon V'hashmini B'chag. So what an interesting comment, that the days of Sfiras HaOmer are like Chol HaMoed. So we'd like to explain a little bit, what does this mean? That the days of Sfiras HaOmer are like Chol HaMoed, in a way that it comes out that there's one long Yom Tov. There's one Yom Tov. Pesach, with Chol HaMoed in between, and Shavuos. It's the longest Yom Tov of the year. It's a 50-day Yom Tov. Can you imagine? 50 days. You know, people, they eat more, it's a big Yom Tov, a long Yom Tov. So what we would like to explain is, what is the connection between Pesach and Shavuos? Pesach, of course, we're commemorating Yetzias Mitzrayim. Shavuos, we're commemorating the giving of the Torah. Why would it be one long Yom Tov? It seems that it's two separate occasions. And what's also very interesting is that if I would ask you, what date of the calendar is Shavuos? Shavuos doesn't really have a calendar date. Shavuos is 49 days after the second day of Pesach. But it doesn't have a date on the calendar, which also seems to indicate that Shavuos is not a day in and of itself. It's just the final day of Pesach. So what does this mean, and what can we take from this? Okay, so to understand this, Rabbi Glatstein, we have to talk about our favorite topic, wine, alcohol, right? We have to talk a little bit about wine. What do we have to say about wine? So we know that on Pesach, not every night of the year, don't get confused, only the night of Pesach, we drink 4 cups of wine. Just the night of Pesach. Why do we drink 4 cups of wine? So we have in Parshas Va'era what we call the Daled Lashonos of Geula. You ever hear that expression? We drink 4 cups of wine, corresponding to the 4 languages, the 4 phraseologies of redemption. Look in number 2. The Psukim in the beginning of Va'era, Lachein, therefore, Emor L'Bnei Yisrael. Tell the Bnei Yisrael, Ani Hashem. V'hoitzeisi eschem mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim. I will take you out from under the burden of Egypt. V'hitzalti eschem me'avodasam. I will save you from their service. V'ga'alti eschem b'zrei netuya. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. U'b'shvatim gedolim, and with great judgments. V'lakachti eschem li la'am. I will take you to me as a people. V'hayisi lachem le'elakim. V'datem ki ani Hashem. You know I am Hashem. So for all intents and purposes, we have just read what we normally consider the 4 terms of Geula. Now the pasuk continues, I will bring you to the land. But if I were to ask you, what are the 4 expressions of Geula, I think everybody would say they remember from the time they're 5 years old. V'hoitzeisi, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. Right? There are even songs. Right? V'hoitzeisi, right? You know how it goes? I'll tell you later if you don't know the song. But everybody knows the 4 lashonos of Geula. V'hoitzeisi, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. V'hoitzeisi, I'll take you out. V'hitzalti, I'll save you. V'ga'alti, I'll redeem you. V'lakachti, eschem lila. and I will take you to me as a people. Now, where does this come from? Is there any basis that these are the four expressions? After all, there are a lot of things going on over here. Then it says, V'hayisi lachem le'elakim. Then it says, Vidatem. Then it says, V'hevesi eschem, I'll bring you. So there are more than four things going on in the pasuk. What's the makar? That the four l'shainos of geula are v'haitzesi, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. So if you want to know the makar, there are many, many sources. The Yushalmi, for starters, Yushalmi na'arei psachim, the beginning of Arei Psachim. The Gemara says in the Yushalmi, Minayin li arba koisos. What's the makar of the 4 cups of wine? Rabbi Yochanan b'shem Rabbi Benaya keneged arba geulos, corresponding to the 4 redemptions. Lachein emar levnei Yisrael v'haitzesi v'lakachti, says the Yushalmi, v'haitzesi v'hitzalti v'ga'alti v'lakachti. You look in the Medrash Rabbah. By the way, this Medrash is in Va'era, also in Vayeshev. Mikan kavu chachamim daled koisa shalal Pesach. Amar of Huna b'shem Rabbi Benaya keneged daled geulai shenemru b'Mitzrayim v'hoitzesi v'hitzalti v'ga'alti v'lakachti. Okay, so you don't get clearer than that. It's Yushalmi. It's a Medrash in 2 places. By the way, it's also Rashi in Arvei Psachim. It's also the Rashbam in Arvei Psachim. It's also Rabbeinu B'chaye. V'hoitzesi v'hitzalti v'ga'alti v'lakachti. Says the Vilna Gaon. Ready for this? You hear what the Gra is about to say? It's unbelievable. Says the Vilna Gaon, let me tell you what the 4 expressions of Geula are. Look at number 5. The Gra in Haggadah Shal Pesach. V'ha'inyan shel hadalid koisos shehei neged dalid geulos. The 4 cups of wine you drink on Pesach correspond to the 4 redemptions. What are the 4 redemptions? V'hadalid geuloseim. V'haitzesi number 1. V'hitzalti number 2. V'ga'alti. How much is that? 3. Right? What's 1 plus 1 plus 1? For all you accountants out there. 3. What's the big question? But there are 4 cups of wine. No, the Gra says v'haitzesi, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti. Says the Gra, v'ga'alti is 2. Why? Because it says v'ga'alti, b'zraya netuya, with an outstretched arm, u'v'shvatim gedolim. That's 2. 1 ga'alti is b'zraya netuya, I'll redeem you with an outstretched arm. 1 ga'alti is b'zraya netuya, v'shvatim gedolim, with great judgment. Says the Gra, whenever you have the number 3, the 3rd one always includes 2. That's a general rule in Kol HaTorah Kula. Number 3 includes 3 and 4. That's what the Gra says. So the Gra says, again, not like the Yushalmi, and not like the Medrash in Vayeshev, and not like the Medrash in Va'era, and not like Rashi in Arvei Psachim, and not like the Rashbam in Arvei Psachim, and not like Rabbeinu B'chaye. The 4 L'shonos are v'hoitzesi, I'll take you out, v'hitzalti, I'll save you, and v'ga'alti b'zraya netuya is 1, u'v'shvatim gedolim is 2. Says the Gra, that is why the halacha is between cup 3 and cup 4, you're not allowed to drink anything else. Right? We know the halacha is after cup 1, if you're feeling the effects of alcohol, you know what you do? Right after you drink the wine, you'll remember for next year, you drink water. Instead of pouring the water into the wine, you drink the wine, and then you quickly drink water. You're allowed to drink water after. Why? Why not? You're allowed to drink between cup 1 and cup 2. But between cup 3 and cup 4, you may not drink even water, says the Gaon. Why? Because cup 3 and cup 4 are all 1. V'ga'alti. And in fact, says the Gra, if you look in the Arizal tells you what kavanah to have when you drink each cup of wine. And the Arizal says you have one kind of kavanah for cup 1, one kind of kavanah for cup 2, but for cup 3 and 4 it's the same kavanah. You know why? Because it's all corresponding to v'ga'alti. Now listen to this. The Yushalmi, and the Medrash in Vayeshev, and the Medrash in Va'era, and Rashi and the Rashbam, they say v'hoitzesi v'yitzalti v'ga'alti v'lakachti. They're all wrong. Says the Gra, it's a printer's error. In the Yushalmi, the printer's made a mistake. Really it's v'haitzesi, v'hitzalti, and v'ga'alti is 2, b'zraya netuya shvatim. It says not like that. It says v'lakachti in the Yushalmi. The printer made a mistake in the Yushalmi. It says v'lakachti in the Medrash in Vayeshev. The printer made a mistake in Vayeshev. It says v'lakachti in Va'era. Printer made a mistake. Rashi, mistake. I, the Rashbam, mistake. Says the Gra, I'll read to you his words. Uma sha'amru b'chal makom hadaled mi v'lakachti. I, in every sefer, in every book you'll ever see, it says v'lakachti. I, in every song, it says v'lakachti. Right? Hu ta'os soifer b'chal makom. It's a scribal error. Why? Because if you're going to count v'lakachti, then you have to count the next pasuk, v'hevesi, also. What's the difference? I'll take you as a nation, and I'll bring you into Eretz Yisrael. That's also important. The answer is, all you need to know is in pasuk Vav. Pasuk Vav begins and ends all the Geulais. V'lakachti is a nice thing. We'll be God's people. That's not Geula. V'hevesi, we'll go into Eretz Yisrael. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. No problem. But it's not Geula. Geula is v'haitzesi, v'hitzalti, because if you're going to count v'lakachti, you have to count v'hevesi. That's the argument of the Gra, and therefore every single sefer that you have, when you go home today, take a big black magic marker, cross it out, and write 3, and the third one is off. It's a mistake everywhere. By the scribes, by the printers. The printers, they knew that you can't have a song with 3 stanzas, right? Na. What are you going to do? Right? So they wanted to put in v'lakachti. But really it's not. It's v'ga'alti v'zrayin natuya and v'shvatim gedolim. But v'lakachti is out, because if v'lakachti is in, then the hevesi has to be in also. Comes along, okay, I don't think we ever featured this before. One of the Rishonim is the Ra'avan. One of the Rishonim, the Ra'avan. The Ra'avan says, what are the 4 languages of Geula? V'haitzesi, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti. V'ga'alti. And v'lakachti, like the Yushalmi, and like the Medrash, and like Rashi, and like the Rashbam. Says the Hagois, the footnotes on the Ravan, it's called the Hagois Even Shlema. He says the Ravan is very, very based. The Ravan is based on the Yushalmi, and the Medrash Rabbah, and Vayeshev, and the Medrash Rabbah, and Vayera, and Rashi, and the Rashbam. The Vilna Gaon says that v'lakachti is out. How could the Vilna Gaon suggest that everybody made a mistake? The printers of the Yushalmi, and the printers of the Medrash and Bereshis, and the printers of Shemais, and the printers of Rashi, and the printers of the Rashbam, they all made the same mistake? It's so highly unlikely that all the printers, they're all in cahoots, they all got together. They needed a lot of siyata d'shmaya to all make the same mistake. Says the Hagois Even Shlema, that it's impossible, like the Gra is saying, to say everyone made a mistake. And therefore it is, and also, by the way, if you look in the Shiltas, which you have on your sheet later on, number 13, the Shiltas also says, v'haitzesi, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. But the Gra has a logical argument. What's the logical argument? If you're going to count v'lakachti, then you should have 5 cups of wine, you should also count v'hevesi. Says the Hagois Even Shalema, we can answer that question very simply. And that is, when we consider the phraseology of redemption, we only consider those things that happened at that time. At that time, God v'hoitzesi, He took us out. At that time, v'hitzalti, He saved us. At that time, v'ga'alti, He redeemed us. And at that time, v'lakachti li, He took us as His people. The Gra asked, why don't we count v'hevesi, bringing us into Eretz Yisrael? Because it happened 40 years later. That wasn't part of that episode in history. That was a later event. So therefore, the Gra wants to know if you're going to count v'lakachti. You have to count v'hevesi, not so fast. All the 4 things happened in one tekufa, in one period. God redeemed us, He took us out, He saved us, and He took us as His people. So why don't we count v'hevesi? It happened much later. It wasn't part of that episode in history. And therefore, we could say that the Yushalmi is right, and the Medrash in Va'era, and in Vayeshev, and the Rashi, and the Rashbam, and the Ravan, they're all correct. V'lakachti is in, v'hevesi is out. What's the difference? The difference is simple. V'lakachti is part of the earlier saga. The Hevesi is part of another episode. Rabbi Glatstein, what we would like to do tonight is answer the question of the Vilna Gaon in a different way. to explain, Rabbi Glatstein, why Vilakachti is considered one of the Dal Lashonos of Geula, one of the 4 expressions of redemption, but why Vehevesi is not. Okay? We would like to maintain that the Yushalmi is correct. Vilakachti is in. The Medrash is correct. Vilakachti is in. The Rashi, the Rashbam, and all the Rishonim. By the way, all the Rishonim that you name, any Rishon you could think of, they all say we would like to try to explain a very big difference between Vilakachti and Vehevesi, and by explaining this difference, you're going to have a new appreciation for the Yom Tov of Shavuos, for the whole period of Sfiras HaOmer, and really what we celebrate on Pesach and what we are anticipating in the upcoming days. Let's analyze for a moment. V'hoitzesi is very simple. God took us out of Egypt. Pshutai k'mashmai. V'hitzalti, very simple. He saved us from a bad predicament. V'ga'alti, He redeemed us. What does it mean v'lakachti? He took us. What did He do exactly? He grabbed us by the neck, by the nose, by the ear, What does it mean He took us? How did He take? What kinyan did He make? You look in the Ibn Ezra on the spot. You look in the Sforno on the spot. Vilakachti ka'asher tekablu es haTorah al har Sinai. When did God take us as a people? When we accepted the Torah at Har Sinai. The Sforno says the same thing. Vilakachti eschem li la'am. When did God take us? B'mayim Har Sinai, at Har Sinai. Now that is very strange, because Vilakachti is one of the expressions of Geula. That wasn't a redemption. The redemption was when we left Mitzrayim. When we left Mitzrayim, we were redeemed. They weren't torturing us anymore. They weren't taking our babies and throwing them into the Nile. They weren't whipping us. They weren't massacring us. They weren't brutalizing us. But how could, if Vilakachti means the giving of the Torah, that wasn't Geula. That was a very momentous, wonderful event that happened to us. But is that part of the Geula? Why would that be considered an expression of Geula? Says the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch is explaining the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer. And he says the simple explanation for the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer is that the whole purpose of the Jewish people, why did God make Jewish people? Why? To eat pizza? What's the purpose of Jewish people? To learn Torah. To learn Torah primarily. That is the main reason the Sefer HaChinuch says that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Listen carefully to the pasuk. Hashem tells Moshe, here's the sign, here's the ice that I sent you. When I take you out of Mitzrayim, you will get the Torah. Ta'avdun es holikim al harazeh. What does that mean? That the sign that you are a true messenger is that when you leave Mitzrayim, that will be the sign that you'll get the Torah. Again, v'zeh lecha ha'is, here's the sign. When I take you out of Mitzrayim, you will get the Torah. Now what does that mean? That means leaving Mitzrayim is the sign that you will get the Torah. If I tell you A is a sign that B will happen, what's the main thing and what's the secondary thing? What's the ikar and what's the tafel? If I say A is a sign that B will happen, B is the main thing, A is only a sign that B will happen. So if Hashem says, taking you out of Mitzrayim is a sign that I will give you the Torah, that means getting the Torah is the main goal. Taking you out of Mitzrayim is only a sign that indeed you will get the Torah. That means the ikar is getting the Torah. The main purpose is getting the Torah. Leaving Egypt is only a means to get there. It's only an ice. Which means the whole purpose of leaving Mitzrayim is only to get the Torah. So if that's the case, we understand a little bit better why, if Vilakachti, which is the 4th language of Geula, refers to getting the Torah, that's part of the Geula. Because the whole purpose of the Geula was to get the Torah. So yes, V'hoitzesi, V'hitzalti, V'ga'alti are languages of Geula, but their whole purpose is for Vilakachti. So therefore, you could also include Vilakachti as one of the expressions of Geula, because that was the purpose of the Geula. But still you say, it's still not the Geula. It might be the the reason why Hashem redeemed us. It might be the reason for the Geula, but it's not the Geula. So what we're going to learn is an amazing thing from the Ramban in his introduction to Sefer Shemais. Ramban says something that we have to know very clearly. And that is, Sefer Bereshis is called the book of creation. Why is Bereshis called the book of creation? We've said this many, many times. Just to explain very quickly. Why is Bereshis called the book of Geula? The book of creation? Because, Parshas Bereshis talks about the creation of the world. But what about the rest of the book? The answer is we have a concept, Masei Avos Simim Abanim. Whatever our forefathers did, it created the future history of the Jewish people. So in fact, the whole book of Bereshis is a book of creation. It created our history. The book of Shemais is the book of redemption. Why? Because we were redeemed. Wait a second. We were redeemed in Bai, and a little bit in Beshalach. But what's the rest of Shemais? Says the Ramban, what does redemption mean? Redemption means being restored to your previous level. What was the previous level of Klal Yisrael? Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And therefore, we are not considered redeemed until the Jewish people are restored to the level of the Avos. Now let's think about the Avos HaKadoshim. They're sitting in their tents, and we know Rashi tells us Sarah Yimenu had the Shechina resting on her tent, which means the Jewish people are not considered redeemed until they are Zoicha, that in their collective tent, which is the Mishkan, Hashem rests on the Mishkan. And therefore, says Ramban, very fundamental words. He says, about 5 lines down, V'hinei, 6 lines down, V'hinei Agalos, and number 10, Einenu Nishlam, the exile is not over, Ad Shuvam El Makoimam, until they're restored to their place, Ve'el Malas Avoisam Yashuvu, and they're restored to the level of their forefathers. Uchsheyatsu mi Mitzrayim, and when they left Egypt, Af al pi sheyatsu mi beis avadim, even though they left slavery, Adayin Yashivu Goyim, they're still considered in exile. So you can imagine, the Jews left Mitzrayim, woo, right? Free, we're free, let's party, free. No, says the Ramban, they're still in Galus. Why? Because they're Fardarbin in the Midbar, they're Nevuchim Midbar. Says the Ramban, Uchshabo el Har Sinai, when they came to Har Sinai, V'yasu HaMishkan, they made the Mishkan, V'shava HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and God returned, V'hishra Shchinasa B'neihem, and Hashem dwelled in them, Oz Shavu el Malas Avoisam, they were restored to the level of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Be'oz Nechshavu Geulim, and only after the Torah was given were they redeemed. Not that they were redeemed before, and the purpose of the redemption was not realized until they got the Torah. They were not redeemed until they got the Torah. No, okay, good. Well, hold on to that question for a second. According to Ramban, they were not considered Geulim. They're not considered Geulim until they got the Torah. And therefore, we understand beautifully. Why is Vilakachti one of the languages of Geula? Because they weren't redeemed. What's Vilakachti, says the Ibn Ezra, says the Svarno? The giving of the Torah. Why is that one of the languages of Geula? Because they were not redeemed until they got the Torah. Vehevesi is out. Why is Vehevesi out? Vehevesi is Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is wonderful. But that's not Geula. Eretz Yisrael has nothing to do with the redemption. When were they redeemed? When they got the Torah. So Vilakachti is in, it's part of the Geula. Vehevesi is out, because that's not part of the Geula. So Rav Bernie is asking, you must have had a lot of holy matzah over Pesach. But the Ramban says more than that. The Ramban says they were not considered redeemed until they built the Mishkan. So then we should really have 5 expressions of Geula. V'haitzeisi, v'hitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti, and v'asali mikdash, or something like that. There's another step missing for the Jews to be redeemed. So comes Rabbi Yerucham Olshen in the Sefer Yerach L'Mayadim, and he comes up with a gra at a left field, the gra in Sefer Chavakuk. You know, you may have missed this one. You may have missed this gra. You know, as you're learning the gra, you may have missed the gra in Sefer Chavakuk. Maybe you didn't get up to the gra in Chavakuk par Gimel. The gra says an amazing thing. Look at number 12. This is from, I believe, the Haftarah, the second day of Shavuos, right? Be'kerev shanim toidia hu neged hamishkan. Sheyachzir HaKadosh Baruch Hu es Beis HaMikdash. Hashem will restore this Mikdash. Chumash Kasav, like it says, Vidatem, you will know, Ki ani Hashem hamoitzi eschem. What does it mean when the Torah says, you will know that I'm Hashem? That's the building of the Mishkan, the Koyal Mishkan. Because when they built the Mishkan, they saw the Rebbeinu Shalom. They saw Hashem. So Rabbi says, it's mamish hafla of a fella. Look back in the pasuk. V'lakachti eschem li la'am. What's that? The giving of the Torah. V'hayisi lachem le'lakim. V'datem. You'll know ki ani Hashem. What is that? What are those words going on according to the Gra? V'datem ki ani Hashem. It's going on the Mishkan. So it is included. The fourth expression of Geula, V'lakachti, which is the giving of the Torah, includes in it the building of the Mishkan. In what words? Vidatem ki ani Hashem. So you'll ask, why doesn't the Mishkan get its own expression? So it could be like the Ramban. The Ramban says later on in Shemais that the whole purpose of the Mishkan was only to capture the Shechina that existed on Har Sinai. So the Mishkan may not have been really a new dimension. It was merely to capture what they achieved on Har Sinai. But in any event, I think what we're learning right now from the Ramban is telling us that the redemption of the Jewish people was not finalized when we left Mitzrayim. We were not redeemed until we received the Torah. So V'lakachti, what is V'lakachti? The Ibn Ezra on the Sfarno says V'lakachti is the giving of the Torah. So now we understand beautifully, not like the Vilna Gaon. Vilna Gaon asked, if you're going to count V'lakachti, you have to count V'hevesi. No. I think it's very clear that there is a reasonable position, not like the Vilna Gaon, like the simple reading of the Yushalmi, that V'lakachti is the giving of the Torah. So why, if you count V'lakachti, do you not count V'hevesi? The answer is we're only considering expressions of redemption. V'lakachti, the giving of the Torah, is Geula. V'hevesi, going into Eretz Yisrael, is not Geula. It's a matana tova. It's a wonderful achievement. We all yearn for it, but it's not part of the Geula. The Geula was complete with the giving of the Torah and the Asiyas HaMishkan. Okay? But now, what we would like to explain a little bit is, why is it that we are not considered redeemed until we got the Torah? In other words, we're still considered enslaved. We're still considered, in a sense, avodim. We're still considered in Golos till we got the Torah. By the way, now we understand very beautifully why Shavuos and Pesach are intertwined, are connected. Pesach is not over until Shavuos. Because, Pesach, we left Mitzrayim. Shkoyach, we're still in Golos. We weren't redeemed yet. We're not redeemed until we got the Torah. The days in between, like the Ramban says, are Chalamoid. It's like we reached one level of redemption, but the final redemption has not been achieved yet. That's why Pesach and Shavuos are not two separate Yom Tovim. It's one long Yom Tov. Why? Because we've only we drank all 4 cups, but only the 3 of the cups we've experienced. The 4th cup we have not experienced yet. We have to wait till Shavuos. In fact, I just heard over Yom Tov, in the Drashas Chassam Sofer. Look it up. Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Chassam Sofer says that all Yom Tovim cannot have Kedusha without a Shabbos. Yom Tov derives its Kedusha from Shabbos. That's why Yom Tov has to be at least 7 days. Why? To have at least one Shabbos. That's why Sukkot is 8 days, Pesach is 7 days. Ask the Chassam Sofer, what about Shavuos? Shavuos is just the last day of Pesach. It's one Yom Tov. It's one Yom. Why? Because we drink 4 cups on Pesach. 3 of them are for what happened on Pesach. 1 of them is for what happened on Shavuos. The Lakachti, now it's very beautiful. Someone in the Shiur in the morning pointed out, that's why you have 3 of the expressions in one pasuk, because 3 of them happened at one time. The 4th one, the Lakachti, happened at a later time. But the Lakachti is in, and the Hevesi is out. Okay, but why is that? Why are we only considered redeemed once we accepted the Torah? By the way, this added point that we made, that Vidatem Ki Ani Hashem is the building of the Mishkan and is part of the Lakachti, is very, very much meduyak in the lashon of the Shiltus in number 13, because the Shiltus doesn't just bring down the words v'hoitzesi, v'yitzalti, v'ga'alti, v'lakachti. The Shiltus goes further, and he brings in the words v'datem ki ani Hashem, which according to the Vilna Gaon is the Asiyas HaMishkan. It comes out very good why the Shiltus also brings in those words. Okay. We're going to revisit a Marsha that we discussed in the Shiurim before Pesach. Pesach, we drink 4 cups of wine. Why 4 cups of wine? Right? Why 4 cups of wine? Says the Marsha. Because there are 4 very tragic situations the Jews were in Mitzrayim. First of all, they were... And the Marsha says in life in general, there could be 4 bad matzavim that a person could be in. And these 4 bad situations run the gamut. And any bad situation a person could find themselves in falls under one of these 4 general categories. Number 1, person doesn't have enough money. Number 2, person has enemies. Number 3, person is not well, is ill, is sick, is weak. Or number 4, a person is so preoccupied in being busy in this world, it just takes them over. Now, and therefore, says the Marsha, Klal Yisrael Mitzrayim found themselves suffering from all these 4 categories, and when they were saved, they needed to commemorate all the 4 benefits, that they were relieved from poverty, they were relieved from enemies, they were relieved from illness, they were relieved from complete preoccupation, and therefore we drink 4 cups of wine. But then the Marsha throws in a real curveball that is going to change our understanding of life forever. The Marsha says, and what's so bad about being poor? And what's so bad about having enemies? And what's so bad about being ill? So we would say being ill, because it hurts. Not having money, you can't buy food. Having enemies, stress. Preoccupied, you can't breathe. Says the Marsha, that's nothing. So what if it hurts? So what if a person doesn't have money and can't eat enough? So you can't eat enough, you'll lose weight. Nebuch, you'll lose weight. And you walk around and you'll be a walking skeleton. So you don't have food and you're in hunger pang and you can't sleep at night because you're so hungry? So what? That's not so bad. There are much worse things in life. What's worse? If a person in life cannot pursue shleimus, perfection, if a person cannot utilize their time in this world to achieve that which God put him here for, and that is, why did Rebbeinu Shalom create a person? For shleimus. Shleimus means perfection. How does a person achieve perfection? By learning Torah, by working on their midos, by gaining Yiras Shamayim. If a person is nebuch, poor, so that he always has to run after making a living, and he can never sit down and really learn seriously and really work on his midos, this person is suffering tragedy. This person is in a torturous camp. This person is nebuch. He doesn't have life. If you cannot divert time and invest time to use life for what it is, that's worse than poverty. Poverty is bad because you can't utilize life for shleimus, says the Marsha. Illness is bad. You know why it's bad to be sick? Because if you're sick, you can't muster your mind to work on your midos, to overcome jealousy, to overcome anger, to overcome arrogance. That's why it's so bad. No, I thought it's bad to be sick because it hurts, because you're in throbbing pain. No, throbbing pain, that's nothing. Who cares if you have a headache? That's nothing if your head hurts. But if you have a headache, and now you can't work on your midos, or you can't learn Gemara, or you don't have time to master a Masechta, that's tragedy. That's tragedy. What's so bad about having an enemy? Well, it's bad to have an enemy. If you have an enemy, you can't live at home. You're right? You have to flee to some third world country. So what? You flee to some third world country and you eat sunflower seeds and you don't have clothing. No, big deal. And you live in the mud and you live in a barn. So what? At least you're alive. But if you're living in a third world country because of your enemies and you can't sit down and learn an hour a day, You're in a Holocaust. That's a Holocaust. If you can't make use of your time, that's the biggest tragedy in the world. Says the Marsha, the 4 cups of wine are not celebrating being relieved from 4 bad matzavim. It's celebrating being relieved from 4 bad matzavim that prevented the Jewish people from achieving what God put them in this world to achieve. If you look in the language of the Marsha says, he says it a number of times. I'll let you look on your own, but I want to show you. Look at number 14. Marsha and Brachas Nandan Amadeus. Ki dalid sibais hakoilalim. There are 4 general categories. Vehem hamoinim la'adam, that prevent a person mehagia el shleimusai, from achieving shleimus. The Marsha doesn't say illness is bad because it hurts. He doesn't say poverty is bad because you can't buy what you need, you can't buy clothing. All these 4 tragic situations are tragic because it's taking away from a person what life is meant for. Look in the Sforno. The Sforno says, why did God take us out of Mitzrayim? Not because the Egyptians were throwing the babies in the river. Not because they were beating us with clubs over the head. That's not why he took us out. So they're beating us with clubs, so we'll have wounds. A wound is not so bad. But if you have a wound and now you can't learn, or now you can't learn Musar, or now you can't think about life, that's the biggest tragedy in the world. That's why God took us out of Mitzrayim. Not because, it hurt when the Egyptians gashed open the Jewish people's skin. That's a little bit bad. That's not desirable. It's not enviable. It says the Sforno, why did God take us out of Mitzrayim? Shehiskavein lahitziacha me'avdas. God wanted to take us out of slavery. Asher boy loy hayisa yachal esbainain. Because in Mitzrayim we couldn't think, and He wanted to take us out to Israel. Liknois hashleimos, to acquire perfection. Sforno says later on, Sheba avodaseinu in Perek Vav, Vaschanan, Pasuk Chaf Aleph, Sheba avodaseinu loy hayinu yichaylim liknois hashleimos. That when you're a slave, you cannot fulfill your purpose in life. Now, we're thinking, is this rabbi for real over here? Is he serious? He really means this? What's this man talking about? That you're telling me? Do you know what was going on in Mitzrayim? It says in the Psukim that the Bnei Yisrael were crying out from the Avodah. If you look in the Medrash says that the type of work that the Bnei Yisrael were doing in Mitzrayim was the most severe and intense, painful type of work. The Medrash says, Ein lecha malacha kashem imlechas hatit. There was nothing worse than working in cement. Working in cement is the most laborious, arduous, painful task. And this rabbi is telling me, but that wasn't so bad. What was bad is they didn't have time to learn Mesilas Yesharim. It wasn't so bad that they were beating them. What was bad was they didn't have time to think about Yiras Shamayim. You know what the Medrash says in Bamidbar Rabbah? That when the Jews came out of Mitzrayim, the majority of the Jews were maimed, were missing limbs. Yeah. You know that? When the Jews came out of Mitzrayim, majority of the Jews were either missing arms, legs, or eyes. Because as they're making the pyramids and they're passing the bricks, the brick would fall on their arm, would fall on their leg, would fall on their eyes. The majority of the Jewish people, says the Medrash, Bamidbar Rabbah, Parsha Zayin Ois Aleph, the Medrash says, Bisha sheyatzu yisam miMitzrayim hayu kol ruban bale mumin. Either the stone would cut off their hand, or a beam would fall on them, or cement would get in their eyes. Yeah, but that's not so bad. They didn't have time to work on their jealousy. It's not so bad that they were walking around with a wooden leg, because what was really bad was that they weren't acquiring bitachon. And the answer is, that is absolutely right. As bad as it is to be missing a leg, chas v'shalom, as bad as it is to be missing an eye, worse than that is a person who goes through life and they don't have serious time to use life for what they were put here on this planet. The biggest tragedy in the world is not physical injury. The biggest tragedy in the world is you go through life and you don't make use of it. Says the Mesilas Yesharim. He says, that for a person of sound intelligence, for them, on the second line is Mesilas Yesharim Perek Daled, Ein Ra Gadol Mechesroin Hashleimus. There is nothing worse than lacking perfection. There is nothing worse in this world than lacking perfection. If you have someone in this world that they're either nebuch, so ill, or so poor, or so busy, that you ask them, no, when was the last time you worked on your midos? And they say, high school. 20 years ago. When was the last time you tried to master a blot of Gemara? 8th grade. Or never. Nebuch, when you hear a terrible situation on the radio, that's nothing compared to the matzav that a person could be in. If a person is not using their life, says Mesilas Yesharim, Ein Ra Gadol Mechesroin Hashleimus. Says Mesilas Yesharim, how does a person acquire shleimus? A person acquires shleimus by doing mitzvahs, by learning Torah, by improving their midos. And if a person recognizes that if a person was put in this world to achieve midos, to achieve Yiras Shamayim, to achieve Torah, they will never want to slacken off. They will never want to, lean back and say, whatever, I'll get around, I'll come to a shiur once in a while, I'll be Torah-dik, I'm a Torah-dik, a mishpacha, right? No. That's all, generalities. But if you wanna get what this world is all about, you have to understand, what are we pursuing? What's our focus? The focus is that you have to make sure you're not in a matzav where you're not able to achieve shleimus. Says Mesilas Yesharim, Hinei V'nimtzoim chasrei hashleimus mashahu lahem tzara gedola be'ra rabba. The biggest tragedy in this world is not using this world. Now I'm going to tell you something that I've thought of in the past. Baruch Hashem, I found recently that Rav Shmuel Grozovsky says this b'shem the Chafetz Chaim. Imagine a guy, Rav Shmuel Grozovsky says in his name, imagine a guy like this. He's sitting back in his office. He's in a very comfortable office. Yeah, the air conditioner is going, and he's leaning back in his recliner, and he's drinking cold water, and he has a lemon in the water with ice cubes, and he's really comfortable. In fact, he even has a water machine on his right side. He doesn't even have to stick out his arm to get the water. And a guy's passing by, and he says, please, you merciful person who always has mercy, have mercy on me. So you would expect the next thing to come out of the guy's mouth. The guy must be dying or choking. If you're invoking mercy, this must be a really desperate request. Imagine if he says, remember my grandfather? He saved your grandfather in the concentration camps. Please, what would you expect this person to be asking for? Something desperate. Maybe this guy in his office, he's dying. He needs, some kind of medication that will save his life. Imagine if he would have said, please, peach snapple. He's meshugana. He's crazy. He needs to be institutionalized immediately. The guy is sitting back in his recliner. He has water with the ice cube and the lemon. He's comfortable. You want peach snapple? You say, hey, pal, get me some peach snapple. But merciful person who always has mercy, have mercy on me. And the fact he's invoking the fact that his grandfather saved the other guy's grandfather, the guy really lost it. Do you know that in davening, there is no place that we say to Rebbeinu Shalom, merciful one who has mercy, have mercy on us. You know, when we daven for Rifa'inu, when you daven for a chayla, you don't say, imagine, somebody knows somebody who's ill. Do you say, merciful God, who always has mercy, please have mercy on this? No. We just say, Rifa'inu, Hashem and Rebbeinu Shalom, heal. And yet there's one part in davening that we say, Avinu of Harachaman, merciful Father. Hamirachem, who has mercy. Rachem Oleinu, have mercy on us. What are we asking for? that sounds like somebody who's about to choke, or he has like a terrorist with a gun at his head, and the guy's about to shoot, and he's saying, Ribono Shel Olam, have mercy on me, he's about to kill me. It sounds like we're asking for life. And the answer is, we are. We're asking the Ribono Shel Olam to help us understand the Torah. Because if you're in a situation that you can't learn Torah, that's the biggest tragedy in the world. When you daven to cure a sick person, you don't say, merciful one, who has mercy, have mercy on me. You know why? Because as sick as anybody is, it's never as tragic as a Jew who could learn more Torah. That's the bottom line. That's it. The most tragic thing in the world is not having the opportunity to use life. And as important it is as health, Rifa'inu, there's no Rachmanis, right? Especially in Nusach Ashkenaz, right? Rifa'inu, Hashem and Eirafa, Hashem and Eirafa, Kisos, Kikemach, Roife, Naaman. Okay, V'Rachman, we'll give one of them. One Rachman we have in Rifa'inu, yeah? You down smart. But you don't have three Rachmanis. Even Nusach Sard. Avinu of Harachaman, Hamirachem, Rachim Aleinu. What are we asking for already? What we're asking for life? It's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly, because that's what life is. Because to live a life where a person is so mitigated by circumstances, they cannot climb out to use life for what it is, that is Tzara Gedola She'en Kamaya. And as tragic as Mitzrayim was, and as terrible as it was that they were building pyramids out of our babies, and they were whipping us, and Nebuch, our limbs were being amputated, that's only a side note in history. That's only, a side note. What's the main tragedy? The main tragedy is, in Egypt, they didn't have time to think. They didn't have time to utilize life. And when you daven every morning, that's the point of the Avinu of Harachaman. When you say Ribono Shel Olam, right? You hear what you're saying to God. You're saying, God, my great-grandfather in Europe, you know what kind of a big tzaddik he was? So what are you about to ask Ribono Shel Olam for? No, I want to make another $3,000 this year because of my great-grandfather? No, you don't bring in your great-grandfather in Baruch Aleinu. You don't bring in your great-grandfather in Rifa'inu. You don't bring him in any other bracha other than the Sein B'Libeinu Lahavin Ulahaskel L'Shmaya Lomad Olamid. When it comes to using life to achieve shleimus, that's the only time you bring in your Zayda. Because that is the most desperate request that a person has in this world. Ribono Shel Olam, I don't want to waste away my one opportunity in this world. Says the Rambam, the halach is if a person kills b'shoigeg, if a person kills accidentally, so they go into Galus. But you know who else has to go into Galus? The Rebbe has to go into Galus. The Rebbe has to go into Galus. Right? So you got to be careful who you teach. Right? Because, you may be moving. Right? So if somebody kills b'shoigeg, he goes into exile. He goes into the Mikvah. The rabbi has to go also. Why? Because it says about this guy, give him life. So fine, he has a lot of life. We would think he has more life without the rabbi. Right? Now he could really live. No, says the Rambam. For somebody who appreciates life without growing in knowledge is death. It's death. It's death. You could have all the money in the world, and you could have real estate, and you could have the biggest home, and the nicest car, and you could be flatlined. We plug you into the spiritual heart machine, you're dead. He's dead. Why? Because he's not using his time. His whole life is pursuing something that he wasn't created for. So now we understand a little bit when Yetzias Mitzrayim was over, when redemption happened. Redemption did not happen when we left Mitzrayim, because the tragedy of Mitzrayim was we were not able to achieve perfection. When were we given the great opportunity of achieving perfection? V'lakachti eschem li la'am. Only at Kabbalas HaTorah. Only at Kabbalas HaTorah were we given that great opportunity. By the way, it's very interesting. When Sarah Imenu sees Yishmael, and Yishmael is being mitzachek, So Sarah says, get this kid out of the house. Garesh is ben ha'ama hazais. So what was the kid doing already that Sarah wanted to kick the kid out? We don't just kick kids out of the house. It's not good. Even a bad kid, you want to keep the kid in the house. At least the kid will have a safe haven, right? The kid's at risk. The worst thing to do is kick them out of the house. So why does Sarah want to kick the kid out of the house? Because the kid is mitzachik. What does mitzachik mean? Rashi says mitzachik means gili arayus, shvichas damim, avodah zara. All the three biggies. Says the son of the Rambam, no, that's not what it means. You know what mitzachik means? He's wasting his time. And he's wasting his time. This kid is living a tragedy. He's the biggest danger in the world. He's wasting his time. Yitzchak can't be around him. Because the biggest tragedy in the world is not to use this world for what it was given for. Just want to add one point. And that is, not only did the tragedy of Mitzrayim not allow us to gain shleimus and achieve what Hashem created us for, it was the intention of the Mitzrim not just to make us suffer. The intention of the Mitzrim was to limit us and to remove from us the opportunity of gaining shleimus. In the Haggadah, number 27, when we say the psukim in Mikra Bikurim in Parshas Devarim, in Parshas Kisavai, Vayareu Eisanu HaMitzrim. Literally, we always learn that to mean Vayareu Eisanu. They did bad to us. We say, they harmed us. The Nesivos HaMishpat wrote a commentary on Megillas Esther, and the Shlosh says the same thing, and the Nesivos says this in a number of places in his commentary on Megillas Esther. Vayareu Eisanu means they wanted to make us ra. Not that they did bad to us, they harmed us. Vayareu Eisanu. They wanted to make sha'asa Eisanu ra'im. They wanted to make us bad. How did they want to make it? Right? You hear the difference? Not that they were beating us. They wanted to make us bad people. So isn't it interesting then that what's the proof they wanted to make us bad? Hava nischak maloi, the Haggadah says. What's the proof? Vayareu Eisanu HaMitzrim k'ma shenemar. Hava nischak maloi. Come, let us deal wise with them. Pen yirbeh. Where do we see there the Mitzrayim wanted to make us bad? So we have something very, very special. The Shachal HaTorah, when the Talmidim of the Arizal, he writes like this. Paro said to his people, Hein hinei am b'nei Yisrael rav ve'otzum mimenu. You know what they were saying? They were saying like this. They saw the Jews of Mitzrayim. They were learning so much Torah. They had Torah from Yaakov Avinu. They had Torah from Yitzchak Avinu. And we have a rule. Kol hamakabel olav ol Torah. Anyone who accepts the yoke of Torah, ma'avirim imenu ol malchus. God casts off the yoke of the government. So Paro says, as long as the Jews are learning Torah, I'll never be able to subjugate them. And therefore my main plan is to remove them from the Torah. Listen carefully. Hinei am b'nei Yisrael rav ve'otzum mimenu is Rashi Tevois ha'evirum. They wanted to remove them from the Torah of Yaakov Avinu. Hinei am b'nei Yisrael rav ve'otzum mimenu ha'evirum. They wanted to remove them from the Torah because they were afraid. They're afraid of the following. Ki sikrena milchama benoisaf gam hu. Who will be added? Who's who? God is who. Like the pasuk says, Hu Elokeinu. The Mitzrayim was afraid that God would join up with all the malachim and fight against Mitzrayim because the Jews are learning Torah. So hinei am b'nei Yisrael rav ve'otzum mimenu. Hevirum, they wanted to remove them from the Torah. Vayasimu olav what? Sarei misim. The numerical value of Sarei misim, says the Shachar Torah, Bittul Torah. The numerical value of Sarei misim is Bittul Torah. Paro didn't want to throw the babies into the river. Paro wanted to take the Torah away from us. That was the main objective of Paro. Because Paro wasn't interested in cutting off our legs. That's nothing. Losing a leg, losing an arm, chas v'shalom, losing an eye, that's nothing compared to losing time from pursuing shleimus in this world. Paro wanted to give the Jewish people the biggest sorrow imaginable. You know what the biggest sorrow is? If when you get to Shabbos, you say, hey, I didn't open up a sefer this week. That's tragic. That's tragic. It's a tragedy. To let weeks go by, months go by. You, at the end of the year, how many Blat Gemara do you have under your belt? Which midos are you better in this year? I don't know, I did that already in yeshiva. So what are you living for now? If you're not accomplishing in Ruchnius, it's the biggest tragedy imaginable. It's the biggest tragedy. Vayemoru es chayehem. They embittered their lives, says the Alshech. What's the life of a Jew? The life of a Jew is learning Torah, doing mitzvahs. They did not allow that. That's what it means they embittered our lives. That's why, Rabbi Glatstein, in the mother of all yeshivas, in the Volozhiner yeshiva, right? The Volozhiner yeshiva is considered the Aim HaYeshivas, the mother of yeshivas. The yeshiva system, as we know it today, the first such example was Volozhin. They had a very interesting minhag in the yeshiva of Volozhin on the 7th day of Pesach. 7th day of Pesach, they would eat their meal in the house of Reb Chaim Volozhiner, and after the meal they would come to the Beis Medrash, and every Talmud would place down their Gemara in the place that they would sit for the upcoming Zman, and they would begin the new Zman of learning on the 7th day of Pesach. Very unusual practice. Give them off. Isuchag, their mothers need them the day after to put away the dishes, and you have to eat pizza the next day. There are a lot of very important things to do after Pesach.
So on Yom Tov.
No. On Yom Tov already they started. Not the next day they started this man. They already started the next man on Yom Tov. Why? Very important lesson. And the lesson is that when we left Mitzrayim, you know what it accomplished? Nothing. How were we redeemed? We weren't redeemed. Were we free? No. Was the tragedy over? Does anything help? Was the situation better? It's negligible. But they're not torturing us anymore. Who cares about the torture? The torture is an afterthought. Torture is an afterthought. That's why first you eat the matzah and then you eat the maror, the Nesiva says. The matzah is real freedom. Maror, the bitterness of Mitzrayim, the physical bitterness, that's an afterthought. It's a side note. The Geula from Mitzrayim was not finalized until we were really redeemed. What does it mean to be redeemed? What does it mean to be free in this world? To use life for its intended purpose. Says the Marsha, throughout life, a person very often finds themselves in one of 4 circumstances that don't allow you to fulfill these purposes. Person doesn't have enough money. I gotta pay the bills. Yeah, but it's a tragedy now, because the fact that you have to pay the bills doesn't allow you to use life for what it's for. Yeah, I'm so busy, I have so many enterprises under my belt. Yeah, wonderful, Baruch Hashem. The cash is flowing in. But what are you doing with your life? It's a tragedy. I'm not feeling so good. Yeah, that's the small part of it. But if you're not using life for its, that's the biggest sorrow, and the biggest simcha is not realized until Shavuos. So you have Pesach. That's Pasuk Vav. Pesach is Pasuk Vav. Lachein emar levnei Yisrael ani Hashem. V'hoitzeisi eschem. V'hitzalti eschem. V'ga'alti. So we're free. We're out of Mitzrayim. No more whips over the head. The babies are free. They don't have to worry. Everybody is happy. But we're not redeemed. We only had 3 Lashonos of Geula. We're still missing V'lakachti. V'lakachti is the 4th Lashon. But then the Gra asks you should count V'hevesi. No! V'hevesi is going into Eretz Yisrael. That's beautiful, that's wonderful. That's not Geula. Geula is V'lakachti. The giving of the Torah was not just the purpose of the Geula. Like the Ramban says, we were not Nigal, we were not Geulim until V'lakachti, until we got the Torah. Why? Because that was the main objective of Parei and the Mitzrim. Of what? Heinei am b'nei Yisrael rav v'atzum imenu he'evirum. They want to remove us from the Torah. Sarei misim. They wanted to stop us. Bittul Torah. So now what we're anticipating, we don't count to Pesach. We count to Shavuos. Because once we're free, now we have a little taste. We have a taste of what we could use our time for. So now we're yearning, we're anticipating the true freedom, which is Kabbalas HaTorah, and that is why all of these days in anticipation of Shavuos are like Yimei Chol Hamoed. They're the intermediary days before the first part of the Geula and the final Geula, the Geula of Kabbalas HaTorah. We should be Zoicha to utilize these days for the intended purpose. We should be Zoicha to Makabel the Torah, be Ava, and Baruch Shalom should give us Siyata D'Shmaya to use our time, to be Kaina, knowledge of the Torah, Yer Shamayim, Midas Toivais, Aviyas Gal Tzedek, Meher V'Yomeinu, Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.